All right. Hello, everyone. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I'm looking for my water bottle, and apparently it grew legs. So, all right. So Sam says, let's start off with why React, why it's so popular, and how applicable is it in the industry. Like we talked about towards in the end. Sure. Uh, chores and so on. No worries. Um, so yeah. So why React? Um, well, it's uh, it's very powerful. Um, it's very it's not so intimidating to get started with React. It's pretty nice. It's a great library. It has a big community. Um, it's uh, it's sponsored and developed by Facebook, so that's great. So it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and it doesn't really tell you to do a whole lot. That's a beautiful thing. The thing with React, it's that it's just a library. It's just a way for you to, use JavaScript to build your UI. That's something that a lot of people have been trying to do, and React is one of the solutions to that. There are other libraries you could use like Vue or even Angular, but React is very lightweight, um, and it has an interesting way of keeping state, and its design is very much a compositional design, as well as trying to uh, uh, trying to follow a functional programming paradigm, which we'll be talking about. Basically from here on out, we'll be touching on a lot of these topics when we get to some advanced JavaScript programming paradigms that we're going to be hitting on later on. So yeah, from my experience right now, I would say 90% of the jobs that I have applied to have React as one of the things that they would like, because a lot of their projects are React based. Um, and that just seems to be where the companies are going. And the reason for that is because if you think about it, if you hire one developer, right, one developer that is really good with JavaScript, they can build your front end with React. They can also build, if you're building a mobile application, they can also build it with React Native, which a lot of the ideas and concepts that come from React are applicable there. So now you have one person that can build your website, but can also build your mobile application using React Native. Then on top of that, if you need somebody to work on the back end, well, you can use Node.js. And then you can use JavaScript. So again, one developer can now do front end for your web application, can do the front end for your mobile application, and then can do the back end in JavaScript. Oh, hey, we need a database. Great. Well, let's use MongoDB. Why? Because it's JavaScript based. So now you have front end for both web, mobile. You have back end with JavaScript with Node.js, and then you have database language using JavaScript, using MongoDB. So it's basically JavaScript everywhere. And there's a meme about that. It has like Buzz Lightyear and stuff. And it's really true. And this is what's this is the trend uh, that's that's happening, and I don't see it you know uh, going anywhere and slowing down. So here's the meme. The meme is basically JavaScript everywhere. So, and this is all thanks to the people like you know what's his name? I think his name is Ryan Dahl, who basically created Node.js and was able to execute JavaScript outside of the browser using Chromium V8 engine. Okay, so that's kind of like a little bit of history there. Okay, so React is a very powerful thing, and once you learn React, understand the concepts, right, the fundamentals, you can learn Vue, you can learn Angular. It's the same thing. Well, not the same thing, but the concept is the same. Okay. So before we get into React, actually, while I'm talking here, you might want to start up a React project. And the way you do that is if you have Node installed already, just to make sure you have it, just run node-v. Okay, and if you get something like this, I'm running Node 12, I should probably upgrade. Then you're good to go. All you have to do now is just run npx create dash react dash app, and then you have two options. Option number one, you want to create a project in a subfolder. So I can call this my, you can call this my project. And so it's going to create a React application in a folder called my project under your current working directory. So there would be a folder here if I were to run this application, and it will say my project. The other option you have is, well, if you want your code to be in this folder, then instead of creating a subfolder, just use the dot indicating create the application in this current directory. And then you let it run. It's going to take a while depending on your internet. Since I'm live streaming and stuff, my internet's probably going to be kind of, chugging. So I don't want to stress it by running that. So I already ran it. And so I already have a project set up. Okay. But before we get into React, we should probably talk about JavaScript functions. So we're going to go back and talk about JavaScript functions before we touch React. Because without a good solid understanding of functions with JavaScript, as soon as we see React, as soon as we open up the code, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, what is a function? Okay. So let's start with something So I'm going to create a file here. I'm just going to call it code.js. And let's just start with the fundamentals again. Let's just recap on our knowledge of functions. So to create a function, we just say function. Okay. And we can give it a name. Remember, the names that we give our functions, these are identifiers, so we must follow the rules for identifiers. And if you look at the JavaScript slides at the very beginning, in the first few slides, we talk about valid identifiers. Okay, so whenever I say this has to be a valid identifier, you can always refer back to those slides so you know exactly what characters are legal and which ones are illegal. So in this function, I'm just gonna call it something like add. Okay, and the function add looks like this. So the identifier is called add. And we use parentheses to denote the beginning of a possible parameter list. So in mathematics, we always talk about a function as something that takes input and can produce an output. Okay. Now the output could be nothing. That is an output, just literally nothing. That's a possibility. Okay. Now inputs, you can also have optional. You may or may not have inputs. Okay. Now, when we talk about a function, let's say add, in your mind's eye, you probably think, hey, there should probably be some inputs here, and then I apply some kind of mathematical, formula, and then I produce a result. So you're already thinking, oh, okay, I need some input, and I'm going to produce some output. But that may not always be the case. Okay. So let's look at a version of a function that takes in some input. So let's say we take an input A and B. Okay. Now, we use the curly braces to continue the body. Okay. This entire thing is called a function. This is my function definition. I am defining what my function is. Okay. I have an identifier called add. This is how I'm going to be able to recall my function. And then I have a list of inputs that this function takes. These inputs are called parameters. Okay. Now, my function can do a couple things. One, I can return nothing. So my function doesn't really do anything. Or it could do stuff, but in this case, not so much. Or I can return a result. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. So in my function, I called it add, so I should probably return the sum of A and B. So we will return A plus B. Okay. So that's, so there you go. We have a function, we have an identifier. So here's our identifier. we have our input list separated by commas, and then we have a possible result, right? We return a plus b. Okay, so we have our inputs, and then it's going to produce an output. Now to get the output, we usually need to store it in something. Because if I just call add, it will return an output, but nothing will happen. So we usually need to catch this. So we do this by assigning it to another variable. So like here I can say, I can use the word let, call this result is equal to add, and I pass in arguments, not parameters, arguments. Okay, so these are going to be the values that are going to be the inputs to my function. So let's say I want to add 10 and 2. So my arguments are 10 and 2. Okay, and then add is going to return something. Based off what I call this function, I can assume that's going to return the sum of 10 and 20. Okay, then I can just do a simple console.log results. So I can display the results of this function. So I'll just run this using node, so node code, and I get 30. So the sum of 10 and 20 is 30. Brilliant. So a lot of times, the way people will describe a function is we say that a function is a unit of computation. That's what we call it. Now, the reason why I'm starting to get very much into these, hardcore definitions is because now we're going to be talking about React, we're going to have to talk about functional design patterns and really understand what functions are. Okay. Now that we have this understanding, let's talk about JavaScript functions. So this is something that is part of JavaScript that is not part of other languages, as far as I am concerned. So this function, as we see, has a parameter list of A and B. However, I can give it no inputs, and it will not crash. So if we run this, we just get an AN, not a number. Okay. It didn't crash. We got the results of not a number. Okay. So again, back to 10 and 20. We run it again. We get 30. Okay. I can also pass it more arguments than what it takes. So I can pass in 30 and 40. Does it crash? Well, let's run it. It does not crash. It just produces 30. It ignored the rest. You see? So Herman's asking, did you start the lecture already, or are you still preparing the stuff? Do you guys not see my screen? Or can you guys not hear me? I would hate that if you guys aren't able to hear me. You guys can hear me, right? Let me know if you guys can hear me. Everything's okay. Okay. Oh, not yet. Well, we technically are, because we're talking about functions, and yeah, you'll see why we're doing this. Okay. So this is interesting, right? How this can happen. I can add more arguments, and I have the arguments here, and then nothing happens, right? It doesn't crash or anything like that. Okay. So that's cool. But what if we didn't know how many arguments we were going to have, right? What if we didn't know, right? Like we wanted to add a, let's say n amounts of arguments together. Let's say we wanted to do something like that. So something like this could be valid. How can we do that using a function? Well, we can do this by doing the following: ... So 3 dots, and then give it a identifier. So we'll call this inputs, for example. Okay, inputs. Now this inputs is declared as an array. You can see we have this block. Now don't mind the any for now. Don't mind the any. Just understand that inputs is now being treated as an array. So what can we do now? Well, a situation that looks like this, where we want to pass variable amount, we say n amount of arguments, right? We can now do that. So I can create a variable, say let sum equal, and we'll start off at 0. And then what we can do is, because it's an array, we already talked about arrays, we can iterate over the array and then compute the sum, and then we can just return that. So we say for let I equal to 0, I less than inputs dot length plus plus I. Okay, just a regular for loop. Again, we went over loops earlier in the JavaScript section. So now we can say sum plus equals. So plus equals is shortcut for equals sum plus something else. In this case, we're looking at inputs at I, right? This is how we index. So let me make this bigger so you guys can see. Okay. So here we are, what we say, as they say the cocktail talk, is we say we are iterating over the inputs array. That's what we're doing. And in here, our units of computation is an arithmetic action here, which is addition. So we're doing some addition here. So that is our unit of computation, is right there. Okay, cool. So I can say return sum. Okay, so 10 plus 20 is 30, plus 30 is 60, plus 40 is 100. So I should, if I did this correctly, get 100 now. And I get 100. Okay. Cool. So now I can create a function that takes in variable amounts of inputs. Amazing, right? Very, very cool. Very cool. And that's how we can do our add. So add. So this is one way we can do it. Now again, here we can shorten this by saying plus and then equals. Okay, and we can run this and we'll get the same thing, 100. Beautiful. Very cool. Now here's the part of functional programming that we have to talk about before we touch React. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because I want this to kind of blend in, stay in the back of your head while we're doing React, and then start coming up with some possible, ways to solve certain problems using React's composition. Okay. So an interesting about functions in JavaScript is we say functions in JavaScript are called first-class citizens. Now, what do we mean when something in a language is considered first-class citizen? What we mean is that you can pass those things along as values to anything. So what do we mean by that? Well, I can take this function add, and I can assign it to a variable. So I'll call this let tuna equal add. So now tuna, okay, is also add. So I can replace this add function invocation with tuna. And then when I run this, here, did I save? Oh. That should have worked. Why is it not working? Tuna should be a function. Oh, I'm sorry. I removed the console. Console.log result. Okay. So when I run this now, I can use tuna instead of add. Hermon's asking, so you can't hear. Oh, maybe you have it on mute by some chance? Okay, so Hermon's having some technical difficulties. Okay. Okay, so as we see here, tuna is now add. That's pretty insane, right? That's crazy. Okay, right? So that's pretty cool, right? So tuna is now add, so we can substitute. So this is what we mean by first-class citizens. We can do stuff like this. We can treat functions as just, values in a way, and we can assign them to variables. Okay? So what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, let's remove this. This means that I can also pass functions to other functions. So here I'm going to create a function called compute, which takes in a function that's going to do the actual computation. Okay? So for a lack of a better word or identifier, I'm going to call it f, which is our function. I am then going to pass it and a series of inputs. Okay, so if I can do this a couple of ways. One, I can pass an explicit array, or two, I can use the spread operator. That's what those three dots are, the spread operator. And I can call this inputs. So I now have a function who takes in as its first argument a function. Okay, so it takes a function as an input, and then I pass it some other parameters, some other inputs. And what I'm going to do is I am going to apply this, I'm going to apply this function on these inputs, and I'm going to return the result. So I'm going to say return f, and I'm just going to pass those inputs as such. So we have a function whose first parameter is a function, and using the spread operator, we say that we can pass now n arguments. We don't know. It could be one, it could be none, or it could be many. And I'm going to take this function and I'm going to invoke it. I'm going to pass inputs as its input. You see how this is working? So now I can say something like, let result equal compute add. You see how I'm passing this function to my compute as an argument, and then I can pass it another series of inputs like 10, 20, 30, 40, so that this function is applied to these inputs. So when I run this, I want to see what the result is. So if I do add, that should be 10, 20, 30, 40. So I'm going to say node code, and I get, what is this here? 10, 20, 30, so compute. What is, okay, I see. So I passed an array, so I should probably remove that part right there, and let's just pretend that never happened real quick. So the reason why this happened was because I passed in this inputs is an array, and I passed it to this function, and then add, when it had the spread operator, is expecting that each element will be a single element, but I passed it as an array, which caused it to to act like that. So if we were to remove that, we're assuming that inputs would be an array, and we're passing this array to this function, and then we have this result. So we get 100. Okay. All right. So the whole point of that exercise is I want to show you that you can pass functions into other functions. Okay, and then we can also return functions if we wanted to. You can also do that. You can return functions from a function. So let's show an example of that. And let's say, why would you want to do that? So let's create a function. Okay. So I'm gonna call this is greater than. So this is kind of like the typical example that you'll probably see in a lot of like books that talk about this particular technique. So I'm gonna create a function called is greater than. Okay, or Actually, let's skip that part right now. Let's see why we want to do something like this. I'm going to create a function called is greater than 10. Okay? We want to know, is a particular value going to be greater than 10? So we pass in as input a value. Okay? There it is. And this is just going to return true or false, right? So we can say return value greater than 10. Okay? Is value greater than 10? Right? That's all we want to know. Okay? We can say let results equal is greater than 10, 20. Is 20 greater than 10? Right? That's kind of like what this is kind of like what this function is supposed to do. Now this is a very simple function, but but we're about to see the power of transforming this. Okay. So let's run this. So console.log result. We're gonna run node code. And yeah, 20 is in fact greater than 10. Right? That's pretty simple. Right? Is 0 greater than 10? So let's run that. Well, that's false. Okay, perfect. So this seems to be working. Okay, now what if we wanted to check to see if values were greater than 20, right? So you'd be like, okay, let's create a function here, is greater than 20, and you can start to see that there's a problem happening here. So we're going to say return value greater than 20. Okay. So now, if I wanted to know if a particular value is greater than 20, I can use this function. Is greater than 20, and let's put in 10. So is 10 greater than 20? That should be false, and we get false. Is 30 greater than 20? Let's run that. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Now, can anybody see a problem with this approach? Okay. Now, again, in this example, we're showing a very basic, unit of computation, which is just us comparing a value to another value, or at least there is a floor that we're trying to compare against, a value we're trying to compare against, that is 10 or 20, right? But does anybody see a problem here? Can anybody see an issue that is arising if we continue on with this kind of logic? Because what if your for whatever reason your job requires you to now test other thresholds. Like let's say you're working on a project that was very heavy in math, and so we had to create a whole nother function to test to see if something was reaching a certain threshold. You have to create another function for that, presumably. Do you guys see a problem here? Can you guys see a problem here? Okay. A lot of repeated code. You could pass the floor value in to make it modular. Yes. Yes. Jim Bob's got it. We are, what we say, not respecting the dry principle. The dry principle here. So let's talk about dry. So dry stands for do not repeat yourself, or don't repeat yourself. Don't repeat yourself. We are repeating ourselves here, right? This is a problem. Now, again, in this example, it's very simple. It's very trivial, okay? But you can imagine when certain things get a little bit more complicated that you're having to constantly repeat some of these same code. And again, the reason why I'm showing you this is because we're going to have to solve these problems when we use React. And so when I show you that, I don't want you to think, oh, what the heck, you can do that? So I'm showing it to you now. And, bite-sized, very bite-sized. Okay. So how can we fix this? Is there a way for us to do something that can abstract some of these details away from us? Okay. Is there a way that we can achieve this? So we can abstract some of these details, because this to me is details. Okay, this is a lot of details here. And the answer is yes. Yes, we can. And the way we do that is by using something called higher order functions. Okay. I told you last week that we were going to talk about, in this entire week, basically for the rest of the course, very advanced JavaScript techniques, okay, that you probably have not seen before. Can make 10 and 20 a variable. Yes, so that is a way, for sure, 100%. That is one way. The problem with that is that we're not creating abstractions in that sense. We're kind of just, muddying the water a little bit. We're making things slightly easier for us, but we're not necessarily abstracting things away. And so what we want to do is abstract. So you're on the right track. You're totally on the right track. But we can do things better than just having another variable. Okay. So how can we do it in a smarter way where it's completely reusable, okay, and it's abstracted? And that's the case of a higher order function. So let's see what that looks like. So suppose we have a function called is greater than, and I'm not going to specify a value. Okay, I'm not going to specify. I'm just going to call it is greater than. And then in is greater than, all you do is pass it some value. We'll call this just value. Okay. Okay. Call this a value. Okay. We then return. This is where your minds are going to get blown. We are going to return an abstraction. That is, we will return a function that contains the details. Okay? But is now being abstracted away, in that is greater than can become anything. That is the point of abstraction. Abstraction is a way to hide details away. So how can I return a function in JavaScript? Well, that's easy. There's a couple of ways. Right now I'm showing you the long way, but we will eventually turn this over in a different way. Okay. So all we do is say function. Do not give it a name. Just go ahead and start with the parameter list. In this case, a number. So we're going to return a function that takes in an input. So we create a body just like before. And now we just say return number greater than value. So value is going to be the value we want to check to see that we're greater than. This number is going to come from somewhere else. You see, we are using a function to create another function, and we are abstracting the details away. So now I can create functions from this function, like this. So I can say something like the following. I'll use const, so we can never change this. I'll say const is greater than 50 is equal to, and we use the abstraction to create it, is greater than, and I pass in 50. This is greater than 50, this variable is now a function who takes in a number, which was this function. So now I can say let result equal is greater than 50, this new version. Now I can pass a number, let's say 60. And I can log that, console.log result. Okay, so it's 60 greater than 50? That is true. Now, look at this. Look at the amount of code I had to write in order to create two functions that one can check against 10 and the other one can check against 20. Okay? Look at this. I created a higher order function that abstracted the details. Now, if I want to create, I can create any number of functions that I can test against. So I can say const is greater than 100 is equal to, and I use the abstraction, the higher order function is greater than what? 100? Cool. Now this variable is actually a function who, when you pass in this number, is going to check against 100. So now I can change this to say is greater than, and I'll put 100. Now notice I didn't have to create function again. Look how much I had to repeat. Here, I created my higher order function. I created my abstraction, and now I'm composing brand new functions from this one function. So now I can test is greater than 100. This should be false. 60 is not greater than 100. That is false. But what about 160? Hit save. Yes, that is true. So now I have functions creating other functions. This is called higher order functions. So a higher order function has the following definition. A HOC, as it's sometimes referred to, is a function whose input is a function and /or returns a function. So, is this a higher order function? Yes, because it returns a function, an abstraction. This compute function is also a higher order function because it takes as an input another function, making it a higher order function. Whether we compose with that or not is a different story. In this case, well, in this case, I'm not composing yet. We'll go into composition later. But I want to show you this, okay? Now, in the introduction, so this is how you would do it using, ES5 or whatever, just old school JavaScript. So I'm gonna comment that out. So let's see how we would do this using ES6. So in ES6 syntax, we have support for something called lambda functions. Okay, this comes from the lambda calculus. Again, further going into the whole functional, functional design that we have. That's basically like being used a lot nowadays, right? In school, we talk a lot about object-oriented programming and inheritance this, inheritance that. I'm not going to show you object-oriented programming, right? Because that's not the answer to everything. What I'm going to show you is something called composition. How can you compose your components? And keep that in mind, components, right? This is a component, right? This was a component. It's a higher order higher order function or higher order component, higher order function, higher component, higher order functions, higher order HOC, just the C just stands for component, but that's exactly what these are. These are just components. It's something you use to create something else. Okay. So with lambda functions, we can do something like the following. We can say const is greater than, set this equal to, and we start off with parentheses right away. There is no work function. We then give it the parameter list if there is one, in this case, value. And then I use something called the fat arrow function, like so. And then I create my parentheses. That's it. These two are equivalent right here, right? Using function, whatever, it's equivalent. I then want to return a function, so I will return a function. I know this is a function because I'm starting with parentheses. I'm going to give it a parameter. Call this number. And this itself is a function. And again, in this function, I am abstracting the details away. So I'm going to return number greater than value. Because that's kind of like what this higher order function, higher order component is basically doing. Okay? It's a function, this is the function, that returns a function that abstracts away the details. So these two are equivalent. So if I hit save and I run this, everything's the same. It's just a different way of writing it. This comes from, this lambda function comes from the lambda calculus, which is, again, we're not going to go into the nitty-gritties of like lambda calculus, but it's something that, you know, if you ever want to go into, you know, back-end development, like pretty advanced stuff, like the stuff that Facebook does, they use a lot of Haskell, which is like very functional based, and having a good understanding of lambda calculus will basically help you there. We will touch some of these topics like memoization and stuff like that, and but you know, and composition and all these things that we do in functional programming, pure functions, side effects, stuff like that. We're going to talk about all this stuff. Now, this is probably blowing some of your guys' minds because you guys are, you know, used to like object-oriented programming, and here I'm creating things without even using object-oriented design, right? I don't need to, because you don't have to. Okay. All right. So hopefully that you found that to be interesting, right? Hopefully you found that to be interesting. Let me know how you guys like that. But I think if you guys don't have any questions, let's dive into React and let's see this stuff in action. Okay? Let's see this stuff in action. Are you guys ready? You guys ready for some React? Let me know if you guys have any questions before we move on. Questions, comments, concerns. If any of this doesn't make any sense. Jim Bob says this is actually nuts. Yeah, it's pretty far out there. Okay. All right, if everybody's good, then we will move on to React. The lambda's functions look so weird. Yep, very weird. All right, so once you run npx create react app, you should have a project similar to what I have here. Okay. We're going to talk about package.json, the locks, all this stuff. We're going to talk about it. For right now, I'm just going to ignore that stuff. Okay. When we get to the node module, we're going to come back and explain what the heck this is. Right now, this looks like a bunch of like crazy stuff. Like, oh my God, this looks so crazy. It's really not. It's really basic. We will go over it. Just, you know, once I think next week is when we start Node. Okay. So we'll talk about that. Okay. All right. So this is what a typical React project looks like. At least if you use the Create React App template, which is if you read the Discord on your announcements, I said there are two ways to create this: npx create react app, give it a project name, or use npx create react app and then use a dot if you don't want to create a subfolder in the current directory that you're executing that command in. What I would recommend you do is use the first option, so you guys see what I'm talking about. Use this first option in the case that you don't know if you're in the correct directory, right? If you're still learning how to use your shell and how to move around the directories, like using cd and yada yada yada, probably go with this first option until you understand what it does. Then once you're more, you know, a bit more comfortable, you can start using things like that. Okay. All right. And if you guys ever have any questions or anything like that, feel free to ping anybody on the tech support or general. I'm more than happy to hop onto a voice channel and talk you through it if you have any questions. Okay. Uh, as they say, a closed mouth don't get fed. So if you need help, please speak up. Okay. So once you ran through those commands, you should have these folders here. There's 3 folders. One called node modules, one called public, the other one called source. All of your code, to say like the majority of your code, will go inside of the source folder. So let's expand this folder and let's look at what's inside. So the index.js, so let's go ahead and open this. This index.js is like the entry point of your program, of your application. So if you come from a Java background, this is basically public static void main, right? This index.js is just that. If you're coming from a C or C++ background, this is your main function, right? In C#, this is your public static void main. Okay, Python, I don't think Python has anything like that. It's just whatever you run, and then it goes from top bottom, right? It's interpreted line by line, top to bottom. Okay. Cool. And so this is it. This is your entry point. Okay. Now, this is how you set up a React, environment. We're not going to talk about this right now. A lot of this probably looks really, really weird, but that's okay. That's okay. However, if you've been following since the beginning, and you were here during the HTML phase, let's go to app.js. And this should look very familiar to you. What does that look like? Anybody want to tell me? What does this look like? Nobody? Nobody remembers any of this? Yeah, it says HTML. Yeah, it looks like HTML. But HTML inside of a function? What is this? This looks weird, right? This looks hella weird. This is what's called JSX. JSX. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again. This right here is called JSX. That is JavaScript XML. Okay? JavaScript XML basically allows you to write JavaScript using an XML-like language or like XML-like syntax in JavaScript. If I take this code, right? If I take this code, right? This is just a function. So if I take this, okay, and I open up, what's it called? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Code. Let's open up this folder. Okay. So I'm going to create a folder, call this app.js, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay, there it is. If I paste this, okay, it's saved. If I try to run this through Node, so app.js, it's going to be like, yo, what the heck is this? Unexpected token here. And that happened on line 3, which I assume is the very first time we meet one of these weird things. This is not valid JavaScript. Right? This is not valid JavaScript at all. Yet, it's valid here. What gives? Right? React, under the hood, uses something called Babel. So Babel is basically called a transpiler. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. A transpiler. It transforms one thing to another thing. So the React Babel transpiler takes your JSX and converts it into valid JavaScript. So it says write code here. So what the heck does a div look like in JavaScript using React? Oh, look at that. That's what it looks like. So this is React.createElement, and you'll notice that it says div in quotes, and then there's null here. The reason why there's null there is because there's no content. So if I type in like hello world, you'll see that we have our hello world. The null is going to be, I believe it's parameterless. So if I did something like, oh, this is going to have a class of, let's say, I don't know, what did we create the last time when we were doing the stuff? We were using something like Tailwind. So we say class, and we had like BG of blue, BG blue 100, right? This looks like HTML, but once we run it through the transpiler, it actually creates this React.createElement div, and it has a JSON object, or I mean a JavaScript object, with a key called class. Actually, this should just be class name, excuse me. And then it just has that. And if we wanted to activate one of the handlers that this div supports, which is onClick, we do onClick, and we wanted to, again, don't mind any of this. Console.log, all this clicked. Okay, like so. You'll see what's happening here. Okay, you'll see what's happening here. Okay, it's just this is a JavaScript object where these attributes are just going to be properties of this object, and the values is going to be whatever I pass into these things. So as we are writing here, this JSX, once we run this, the Babel transpiler will take this JSX and convert it into valid JavaScript. And let's see that in action. So to start your React project, you run npm start and hit enter. Okay, this might take a little bit to start up. Because again, it has to do all the transpiling, right? And it does a lot of caching, it does a lot of other stuff, okay? And if everything is successful, then you should see this, okay? All right, that's cool. So let's right click, go to inspect, go to sources, okay? Here's our source. There's some stuff there. There's our Webpack. This is our source. There's our static. Here's our JavaScript. This is a bundle JSX. So let's take a look at what this looks like. And oh, hey, look at that. This is some funky looking JavaScript, right? Our code is in here somewhere. Here's main.chunk. So it's probably, more than certain it's going to be somewhere in here. I'm not going to really look for it, but you can see a lot of this stuff looks kind of funky. We didn't write this code. This code is all getting created for us. Here's our app. Here's app. Returns an object, a React JSX dev runtime Webpack import module 2. What the heck is all this? There's our div, and it looks like there's the creation of a JS object. And hey, there's our class name. There's children, which we'll talk about that. All kinds of stuff. Wow, that's very interesting. So this class name is coming from here, class name. If I attach something else to it, like I don't know, foo bar equals bar, hit save. I go back here. Okay. We might have to refresh this real quick so I can see that part. There's a JS, chunk. There's foobar. Okay. That's all it is. So that HTML stuff that you're looking at is not HTML. It's JSX. It's just that's kind of the whole point of why React is so damn popular, is because we can write HTML inside of our JavaScript environment and we never have to leave. You don't have to flip between your HTML, your JavaScript. You're just always in one place. You can switch between the two environments, which I'm going to show you, but the idea is that you can write HTML and JavaScript, quote unquote HTML, side by side. So you can already start to see that there's some powerful, things at work here, right? A lot of cool things that we can do with this. Okay, so a tip of the beanie to the React team and Facebook for creating something so elegant and very powerful. Okay, so let's put this side by side. Let's play around with this. Okay, so let's inspect this source folder here. So we have a couple of files here. We even have CSS files in here. Hey, look at that. We have some CSS stuff. Great, right? You guys remember CSS, right? You guys know what this dot means, right? These are classes, right? Text align center, right? If I were to, I can change this in real time and say left and hit save. Okay. Okay. And we have, let me see, save. Okay, well, it doesn't do anything. Let's see. What else can we do here? Oh, it's probably because this all aligned. Let's say make that left. There you go. Move things to the left. Move things to the right. Hit save. Move to the right. Oh, I don't know. I'm breaking stuff now. It's fine. Let's put everything back. Cool. But you can do stuff like that. Right? You can change the color if you wanted to. The color blue. Let's see what happens when you turn it blue. Hit save. Okay. Somebody's changing the color already. Yeah, somebody changed the color right there. So that's why it's getting ignored. So I can go over here and change this to blue. And now it's blue. You see, you can do stuff like that. All right, cool. All right. Okay, so the other new thing that we haven't seen before is these imports. That's interesting. What the heck is an import, right? So an import is basically a way for you to bring in stuff, resources from another location. You can bring them in. For example, here's an SVG file. So we say import logo from this SVG. So we're just giving this import, whatever we're grabbing from here, a name. Just calling it logo. Again, you can call it tuna if you wanted to. And here's the SVG. The SVG is just this. It's just an SVG, regular old SVG. All right. We're bringing that in. We're loading it in. Okay. The dot slash means from the current directory. So this is saying, if you were to see this, this just means that logo.svg should be in the same directory as this file, app.js. And app.js is here, logo.svg is there. Okay. I could have, you could have created a folder called logos, and I could have moved my logo over there, hit move. This will break. Okay. And then I could have gone dot slash, and then go into logos folder, and then go to, what's it called? Logo.svg. Logo.svg. Hit save. And there you go. Okay. That's it. So you can put things wherever you want. App.css, same thing. I'm importing it, although in this case, you don't give it a name. In fact, you don't see it used anywhere else. We just say import. What does this do? Well, what this does is it injects the CSS into the HTML DOM. So if we go to inspect element here, let's make this bigger. Here's the head. Here's the styles. Okay. This is probably some of the default styles that got loaded previously. And then here we go. Here's the app.app. That's this. App.css. Look familiar? Look familiar? Yeah? Same thing. Right? It gets injected into the head. All of this stuff is being done for you through Webpack, which is a technology that we'll probably talk about later. It's kind of hard to learn, actually. Webpack, there's a lot of details. Usually there's a team dedicated to building out the Webpack stuff to do all of this processing. Okay, but we'll talk about it. Okay, so Webpack is doing all this for us. That's beautiful. Okay, So we can inject CSS whenever we need a component like this to be loaded. Great. So if I were to just remove this, right? You'll notice that we just have this like default styles, and our styles is gone. It never got injected. So now we have like, this default styles, right? But if we bring it in, it gets injected. See right there, boom, it got injected. You see that, how it just popped up? Now it's right here. Okay, it got injected. It's injecting things in and out. Right? That's crazy. Right? And so Webpack is doing all this for us. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So, what the heck is app.js? Right? In the grand scheme of things, what should we refer app.js as? We refer app.js as a component. It is a component. Okay, repeat after me. Component. Okay? It's not a class file. Okay? It's not an object. It's just a component. Now, by default, okay, the way Node works, because this is all powered through like Node and stuff, all files, by default, all of the code in the files are hidden. We have to manually make them public. We say we have to export them so that they can be used outside of this file. Okay? So, we have this function called app. Okay? We have a function called app. Which technically, this div is a function call. And that create element that we saw earlier with the Babel, here, create element, that returns another function, right? That's why I kind of want to like talk about functions that return functions. So it's a function call that returns a function, right? So this is basically just that. It's just a function. So these divs internally, when we call create elements or whatever, we're just returning another object, another function, depending on the context of what you're doing. Okay. So we don't actually ever return the actual HTML. React internally will eventually read those create elements and then create the DOM structure itself. So React is what's actually creating the HTML here, which if we look at the body, we can see we have our div, we have this header, we have the image, which is that logo that's animating, just rotating, and the p tag says edit, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So React is handling all this stuff for us. Cool. But in order for React to be able to see this stuff, we have to expose this function to the outside world. So how do we do that? We say export default and then the function name, app. Okay. So now how do we use this? Well, in index.js, we import app. Okay, we called it app. We hover over here. What is this? This is an alias for the function app, which is a JSX element. React already knows, right, that this is a function, but in particular, this is a JSX function. So we know we have to transpile this at some time in the future. Okay. But here's the crazy part. I told you that this is a function, yet look what's happening here. Let me zoom in here. We are executing the function as HTML, like this XML-like syntax. Isn't that insane? So this function is now being executed like XML. Crazy, huh? Isn't this crazy? This is all crazy, right? This is a lot. This is a lot to take in, right? So whenever we have a component and we need to, use it in our React stuff, in the JSX world, we have to use this syntax. Okay. So moving forward, every component that is a JSX like function must always be capitalized. Yeah, I'm pretty much lost. No worries, no worries, don't worry. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. All right. So for now, we're not going to really touch index.js. Here's just an example. You ignore the React strict mode. We'll talk about that. For now, let's just look at this. So we have this function, but we must execute it in a JSX syntax, which is why we need to have it as an uppercase, because there's some rules. If the first letter is lowercase, okay, the JSX is going to think you're referring to a native HTML tag, but app is not a native HTML tag. So in order to distinguish native HTML tags from our own tags, we use an uppercase letter. Okay, so that's as much as you need to know from there. Okay. This here, reduce this. Okay. So let us obliterate all of this. We will keep the div, and we will remove all of this stuff. Cool. All right. So now if we look at this, it's now blank. Doesn't do anything. I can type in, let's see. I can type in hello world, hit save. You'll see it pop up there. It says hello world. Hello world. Hello. Hello. Right? Cool. Okay. So let's create our own components. Okay. So in this source folder, I'm going to create a new folder. So you can do here, you can right click, new folder. And it's pretty standard to call where you're going to put all your components, that folder components. Okay. So we have a folder called components. Okay. I'm going to create a file in here. I'm going to call it greeting. Okay. .js. Now, I don't like .js as the extension. I like JSX. I don't know why the React template doesn't use JSX. It always uses JS. The reason why I like to use JSX instead of JS is because in your React project, you will be writing vanilla JavaScript to do certain stuff. So I like to distinguish between React components and my JavaScript code. So JavaScript code that's just JavaScript and has absolutely nothing to do with React is just .js. And then any React components that use any kind of JSX in them, I use the extension .jsx. And you'll notice that if you're using VS Code, you have this like nice little icon, which is the React icon. Okay. So it knows that, okay, you're talking about React here. Okay, cool. So we're talking about React. Nice. All right, so how do you create a component? Well, it's just a function, right? It's just a function. Nothing more, just a function. Okay. So this is how I like to create my React components. I always start, the very first thing at the very top of my file that you're going to see is import everything as React from React. We're grabbing it from the React library. Okay. These are my first import. I'm importing everything from React as React. So this is called aliasing. So as React, as whatever, this is called aliasing. Again, don't mind too much. This is just importing all of the React APIs. That's all we're doing. So I'm gonna put this comment at the top. All right, importing all of the React APIs. That's it. Okay, nothing more, nothing less. That's all I'm doing. Okay. Then I just create my function. Function. And then it is customary, okay, to call your function the same name as your file. So if my file is called greetings.jsx, then my function should be called greetings. No JSX, just greetings. Okay, and that's it, greetings. And we end it, no inputs, not yet. And that's it. Okay. Okay. We then say export. Okay, well, let me show you what happens if we don't do that. Okay, so we have greetings. Okay. So let's go to app.js and let's bring in greetings component into app. So how do we do that? Well, app.js is here, and the file I'm trying to bring in is greetings, which is inside of the subfolder called components. So I have to go over here and say import greetings from // so I do / for my current directory, and there's components / and then greetings, and then with the semicolon, done. There we go. So import greetings from // so my current directory, and then go to the subfolder components, and then the file greetings. Cool. Now when we hover over greetings, it says greetings is declared but its value is never used, and it doesn't really say much about greetings. It says greetings. Okay. Now I told you in order to execute these functions inside of the JSX world, we need to do it like this. Greetings, like so. Just like that. It's a self-closing tag. Hit save. Oh, failed to compile. Attempted import error. / components greetings does not contain a default export. Import it as greetings. That's because we didn't export this, right? No one can use this function. So we have to make it publicly visible by saying export default greetings. Oh. Hit save. Okay, cool. And now we get nothing. Nothing. Okay. Nothing happens. Okay. So how can we get something to print to the screen? I want to say hello world. How do we do that? Okay. How do we do that? Well, if you're a React component, then you always have to return something. You can return undefined, that's fine. It just means that you're not going to draw anything. Your component doesn't render. We say it doesn't render. Okay. But if we want to, draw something to the screen, we need to render something, then we have to return something. What are we trying to return? We're trying to return this HTML-like stuff. So we say return, so this component must return something. Okay. So the way I like to do this is I always say return, and then in parentheses, and it's not a function thing. This is just a way to encapsulate stuff together. So I can have multiple lines. So I say return, and then here I put in whatever I want. Think of an HTML thing that we talked about last, 2 weeks ago. Any of those HTML elements we can use in here. For example, I can return an input field. There's my input field. Type. Right? What was one of the things that we can say? Type. What was it? Password? It's a password field now. Ooh. What was it? Type checkbox was one of the ones we talked about. Oh, look, it's checkbox now. Ooh. Right? Type date. Oh, look, now it's a date. Ooh. Right? It's just your regular old HTML-like stuff, but it's not HTML. It's JSX. Okay? We have to make that clear. Okay? So for now, let's just use a div. Pretty customary. And let's just type in greetings. Like that. Save. It says greetings. Cool. All right. Not too bad. Not too bad. But what if I wanted to customize this message, right? What if I wanted to customize this message? How would we do that in vanilla JavaScript? If I wanted to customize what was being displayed here, how can I customize this? Anybody have a guess? How can we customize this? If I wanted to change this, what would I do? How would I do this? Right now, this function takes there's no parameters. If I wanted to have a custom display here, what do you think I should do? What do you guys think? How would you do this in regular old JavaScript if you had a function? If you wanted to pass a specific value in, what does the function require? Anybody? Nobody? Emmanuel says inline. Okay. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by inline? Okay. All right, well. Okay, I'm gonna elaborate then. You want to change the font, right? Not the font. I just want to change the context here. I just want to change greetings. I want to be able to change this to something else, right? I don't want to hard code. Remember, this is hard coding. I don't want to make this like, oh, greetings always says greetings. I want to be able to change this, right? If you had a function, how would you normally do this in a function, right? The answer is you pass an argument, right? A parameter, right? You bring something in as a parameter, right? That way you can be like, I want you to print this specific thing. So for example, let me do this. Do that. Okay. All right. I'm gonna just obliterate all of this. So if I had a function called this greetings, I just displayed console.log, and it just says greetings like that, and I invoke it, greetings like so. Okay. If I run node code, it just says greetings to the console. That's it. So if I wanted to change what it displays, what do I do? If you have a function, what do you do? Like if I want to do something like this, I want you to say hello world. How would I do that? Well, wouldn't you want to have a parameter to pass into your function as an input? So you could say, call it greetings, and then you say message, I suppose, call it message. And in here, you can just pass in message. So now your function is completely, dynamic, at least as far as the content is. It doesn't know. It just knows that I'm just going to display it. That's my only job, is just display it. So now I can run this. Now it says hello world, and I can change this to something else. I can say like, greetings, earthlings. Something like that, right? And it's completely dynamic now. So the answer is you use a parameter, right? If you want something dynamic, you have to pass it as a parameter of some kind, right? So how do we do that with React? That's the question. How can we achieve the same effect using React? And the answer is something called props or properties. So in app.js, I'm using my function here. Again, it looks funky. It has that XML-like syntax. And I would like to pass it something, right? I want to be able to pass it a prop. We call them props in React, just properties. Okay. And so in here, just like you would in like in HTML or whatever, you just create an attribute. I'll call it message. Again, you don't have to call it message. You can call it whatever you want. But here I'm going to call it message. I'm going to put hello world. So I can pass this data as a message to greetings. I hit save. Nothing happens. Well, nothing happened because I need to get it. I need to extract it. So with React components, there is always going to be at least one default input that all your components will grab. That is called props. Okay, props. Okay. Now let's see what props looks like. So I'm going to say console.log props. Okay. I'm going to hit save. Now let's see what it looks like. So here, when I do a console.log, it's going to go to my console. And here it is. So ignore all of this stuff. Let's refresh this. There's our message. So look at this. It's a JavaScript object. Doesn't this look like a JavaScript object? Right? Looks like a JavaScript object to me. Right? The prototype is even telling you it's an object. It's just an object. But the thing is, what does this object contain? It contains a key called message, and the value is what we passed in, which is hello world. So Sam's saying is make sure you know what props is. That is a React.js interview question. Yes, that is definitely a React interview question because it is probably one of the most basic things that you can ask about React is what is props? Props is a way to send data to a component as input, right? That's all it is. Because remember, your components are just what? They're just functions. That's all it is. Okay, so we have a JS object with the what we put here, message and then hello world. So is message like a standard or something? No, it's not. I can call it Apple. Now it says Apple instead of message. You can call it whatever you want. Okay. Now, you shouldn't call it whatever you want here. You should call it whatever you want here. Greetings should expect. See the difference here? Greetings should expect that you pass it something, okay, and that it knows where to get it from. So if props is just a JavaScript object, then I can say props and then use the dot keyword, and I can say, okay, I want to grab the message. Okay, so now I want to log message. Right now it says undefined because I'm passing the message as Apple. Okay, so we need to change that. So I'm going to go over here and change it from Apple to message. Now it's going to say hello world here. Great. So now I found a way to extract it. Now how do I use it in my component inside of greetings? So in app.js, I pass it a message prop with the value hello world as a string. Greetings knows how to grab it, but now that we know how to grab it, we need to know how to use it. Okay, so I'm going to delete this now. So to replace this greetings, we just delete that. And to inject the data from props, we used a curly brace like this, and notice the curly braces turn blue. See how the curly braces turn blue? So now we say props.message. Okay. Now when I hit save, it's no longer going to say greetings, it's going to say hello world. See that? Props.message. And we have to wrap it inside of these curly braces. This is how we can inject JavaScript code inside of JSX. Remember, this right here is JSX. This is JavaScript. Props.message, this is an object. This is an object. Props is an object. This message is one of the properties of that object. This is JavaScript. This is not JavaScript. This div is not JavaScript. That's JSX. So in order for us to have JavaScript code alongside our JSX, we just need to use these brackets here, these curly braces, in order for us to write JavaScript code alongside our JSX. We're essentially embedding JavaScript code inside of JSX. And that's it. Now and the beautiful thing about components is that they're reusable. I can create as many as I want. Greetings. Message here, call this hi everyone. And it's reusable. It says hello world, hi everyone. I can create as many of these as I want. I can just copy this, paste, 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 paste. Create as many as I want. Look, they're all right there. Right? There's no shortage of how many times I can use this. It's just a function. When I call them like this, I'm just executing it like a function, essentially. And that's it. That's all that's happening. Isn't it crazy? It's pretty crazy. Right? All right. So that was props. Okay. On Wednesday, we will talk about some more things that we can do with props, as well as state. Okay. So we're going to want to keep track of some state, you know. So we'll do that on Wednesday since it's already 7:30. So hopefully that kind of, you know, gave you a little, you know, a little taste of what we're going to be doing with React, and the new stuff that we learned with JavaScript, that, you know, functions returning functions and using higher order you know, functions to create other functions in order for us to abstract certain details away. And you'll notice that the amount of code that we ended up writing by abstracting it was actually a lot less. So that is similar to a method in Java. Yeah, you could say that. You know, you can just reuse it, call it as many times as you want. You know, it don't matter. Call it as many times as you want, right? It's a beautiful thing. Okay. And you notice that we have it all here. And if we inspect, not do that. Let's inspect under elements. We can see here in this div, there are all our divs. Div, hello world, hi everyone. Boom, 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 boom. These are the divs, right? So this div is this div right here. These divs inside is because greetings is a div with this content here. See that? And I can go to any single one and watch, pay attention to this right side. I'm gonna change this hello world here to, you know, boogie oogie. Okay, boogie oogie. And when I save, watch this one. Watch what happens. Look at that. It like blinked a little bit. It blinked. That's because React reacted to the changes. That's why we call it React. And instead of having to re-render the entire application, it knew that only that one part changed. So it only updated that one little part, and that's what makes React so powerful. It doesn't require the whole application to reload. It only updates those little pieces. And that is what makes React so powerful and why it's becoming so popular. It's a very beautiful thing. You notice that the whole document didn't reload. It was just that little piece. React figured, oh, that's the only thing that updated? Okay, I'll re-render it. Very cool stuff. Okay? Cool. So on Wednesday, we'll talk more about props, and we'll bring up some stuff like state. Okay, we'll talk about state. How can we keep track of state? And so that will be the topic for Wednesday. So you know, thank you for coming. I hope this interests you, right? So you guys, you know, for sure keep coming. and stuff like that. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, please use the SoDA channel. If you're having an issue creating your React project, or if you're running into any kind of like React problems or anything like that, please use the Discord. If you're not running into any problems, you know, I'm gonna think a couple things. Either you guys are all, everything is straight away. You guys totally understand this, or you guys aren't trying it. So please try it, and then use the Discord to ask questions. Okay. With that, I will leave you guys to it. Try it out. Try to create the greetings component and attach it to your app.js, and just try something like this. Okay, just try it. So on Wednesday, we can play around with some more props, and then we'll try some state stuff. Okay. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you guys all for coming, and I hope you learned something. All right. Bye, everyone.